An Anti-War One-Liner Guide. Chapter 1. Anti-War Ideas, Quotes and Comments. George Orwell quotes. Doublethink means the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them. George Orwell. Every war when it comes, or before it comes, is represented not as a war but as an act of self-defense against a homicidal maniac. George Orwell. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. In our age there is no such thing as keeping out of politics. All issues are political issues and politics itself is a mass of lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's not so much staying alive, it's staying human that's important. What counts is that we don't betray each other. The essential act of war is destruction, not necessarily of human lives but of the products of human labor. War is a way of shattering to pieces, or pouring into the stratosphere, or sinking in the depths of the sea, materials which might otherwise be used to make the masses too comfortable and hence, in the long run, too intelligent. War against a foreign country only happens when the moneyed classes think they are going to profit from it. War is peace, freedom is slavery and ignorance is strength. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Writing a book is a horrible, exhausting struggle, like a long bout of some painful illness. One would never undertake such a thing if one were not driven on by some demon whom one can neither resist nor understand. Anti-War One-Liners 1. Former British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook said this. The truth is, there is no Islamic army or terrorist group called Al-Qaeda. And any informed intelligence officer knows this. But there is a propaganda campaign to make the public believe in the presence of an identified entity representing the devil only in order to drive the TV watcher to accept a unified international leadership for a war against terrorism. The country behind this propaganda is the U.S. Manuel Valenzuela said this. What was once the nation and the people of Iraq has been transformed into an amalgam of carnage, blood, misery, and decimation the likes of which the world has not seen since World War II, or Vietnam. Iraq has become a human catastrophe, a defeat for humanity itself, birthed not through tempests or tsunamis or earthquakes, but through the criminality, corruption, and human wickedness of one nation. It has been humankind that has rooted itself in self-debasement, our failure to act one more silver chalice in our trophy case of human wickedness. In order to nip disorders in the bud, the sternest measures must be applied at the first sign of insurrection. It should also be taken into consideration that in the countries in question a human life is often valueless. In a reprisal for the life of a German soldier, the general rule should be capital punishment for 50 to 100 communists. The manner of execution must have a frightening effect. German Gen. Keitel, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, September 1941, historylearningsite.co.uk. My country right or wrong is like saying, my mother drunk or sober. Rules of engagement are a set of guidelines for murder. Emergencies have always been the pretext on which the safeguards of individual liberty have been eroded. A government big enough to give you everything you want is also big enough to take away everything you have. A great war leaves a country with three armies, an army of cripples, an army of mourners and an army of thieves. A great war leaves the country with three armies, an army of cripples, an army of mourners and an army of thieves. A hospital alone shows what war is. A lasting order cannot be established by bayonets. A visitor from Mars could easily pick out the civilized nations. They have the best implements of war. A man who kills on his own is a murderer. A man who kills at his government's request is a national hero. A man who says that no patriot should attack the war until it is over is saying no good son should warn his mother off a cliff until she has fallen. A nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is a nation that is afraid of its people. A people free to choose will always choose peace. A rational army would run away. A standing army is a standing menace to liberty. A thing is not necessarily true because a man dies for it. A violent nation is not good like the USA. A tyrant has succeeded in his search for absolute power when his own people fear to question his actions. After each war there is a little less democracy left to save. After every victory you have more enemies. All mankind being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. All wars eventually act as boomerangs and the victor suffers as much as the vanquished. All wars come to an end, at least temporarily. But the authority acquired by the state hangs on, political power never abdicates. All wars are fought for money. All wars are follies, very expensive and very mischievous ones. All warfare is based on deception. All war represents a failure of diplomacy. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. All those who seek to destroy the liberties of a democratic nation ought to know that war is the surest and shortest means to accomplish it. All the war propaganda, all the screaming and lies and hatred, comes invariably from people who are not fighting. All the gods are dead except the god of war. All murderers are punished unless they kill in large numbers and to the sound of trumpets. All men having power ought to be mistrusted. All government wars are unjust. All it takes is a single act of aggression to permanently wound a nation's reputation. All governments suffer a recurring problem: power attracts pathological personalities. All forms of violence, especially war, are totally unacceptable as means to settle disputes between and among nations, groups, and persons. Almost all war-making states borrow extensively, raise taxes and seize the means of combat, including men from reluctant citizens. Tyranny may successfully rule over foreign peoples, it can stay in power only if it destroys first of all the national institutions of its own people. Almost any sect, cult, or religion will legislate its creed into law if it acquires the political power to do so. Always there has been some terrible evil at home or some monstrous foreign power that was going to gobble us up if we did not blindly rally behind it. America wreaked violence against the people and the land of Vietnam to supposedly protect them from communism. America does not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. She is the well-wisher to the freedom and independence of all. America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves. An empire founded by war has to maintain itself by war. An army of principles can penetrate where an army of soldiers cannot. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Anti-war one-liners 2. I joined in 03, cause I was broke, I needed money, but I was a young American kid, I wanted to fight in a war. I joined up. A month out of training I arrived in Baghdad, Iraq, January 04. Saddam's been captured. And I get there and the guys I'm serving with have been there for 6 months already, they were there in 03. And I go, well, you know what, I think it's come out that, these people had nothing to do with 9/11s, there was no Iraqi on those planes. We can see around here there's no Al-Qaeda, there's no terrorist syndicates in Baghdad, or Iraq. Saddam had stamped them out. And I asked my buddies, well, we're here to find weapons of mass destruction. And they laughed at me. And I said, well, we're here to help the people, and they laughed at me. And I said, what's our mission? What's our goal? They're like, all we're trying to do is make it home alive. Anderson describes the escalation of violence against unarmed civilians. In April, they told us, in a crowded area, if one person shoots at you, kill everybody. Anderson explains the rationale from the officers: they members of the crowd of people are letting them the person or persons firing at the US military attack you. They're no longer innocent if they're there at the time of the crime. 9/11's Conference, Chandler AZ, February 23 to 25, 2007, 911tv.org. An eye for an eye makes us all blind. Any forces that would impose their will on other nations will lose in the end. Just look at history. All tyrants lose. This includes England, and now the United States is the most hated country in the world. Any excuse will serve a tyrant. Apathy is a great sin. Arbitrary power is most easily established on the ruins of liberty abused to evil. Are bombs the only way of setting fire to the spirit of a people? Is the human will as inert as the past 2 worldwide wars would indicate? Armies march upon neighboring lands, killing thousands, and pillaging the very hills. There never was a good war or a bad peace. As long as we believe that wars are inevitable, we will have them. As a rule of thumb, if the government wants you to know it, it probably isn't true. As far as I am concerned, war itself is immoral. As long as mankind shall bestow more liberal applause on their destroyers than on their benefactors, the thirst for military glory will remain the vice of the most exalted characters. As for being a general, well, at the age of 4 with paper hats and wooden swords, we're all generals. Only some of us never grow out of it. As long as we can talk with people, as long as one can keep the guns quiet, one has a chance. As scarce as truth is, the supply has always been in excess of the demand. Because I do it with one small ship, I am called a terrorist. You do it with a whole fleet and are called an emperor. Before the war is ended, the war party assumes the divine right to denounce and silence all opposition to war as unpatriotic and cowardly. Behind the front government sits enthroned an invisible government owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. Blind faith in your leaders or in anything will get you killed. Brute force is not our salvation, especially as directed by state central planning and done with little regard for the innocents. Can anything be more ridiculous than that a man has a right to kill me because he lives on the other side of the water and because his ruler has quarrel with mine, although I have none with him? Chauvinism equates the national honor with military victory. Children have been shot in 40 other conflicts I have covered. Death squads gunned them down in El Salvador and Guatemala, mothers with infants lined up and massacred in Algeria, and Serb snipers put children in their sights in Sarajevo. But I've never watched soldiers entice children like mice into a trap and murder them for sport like in Gaza. Christopher Hedges, Harper's Magazine. Civilization began the first time an angry person cast a word instead of a rock. Civilized society is perpetually menaced with disintegration through this primary hostility of men towards one another. Commerce with all nations, alliance with none, should be our motto. Conflict is the criminal's paradise, it is the only time when killing is allowed, theft is tolerated and rape is forgiven. Conquest is not in our principles. It is inconsistent with good government. Conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional. Conflict cannot survive without your participation. Corrupt business and corrupt politics cause war. Criticism in a time of war is essential to the maintenance of any kind of sanity. Cruelty must be whitewashed by a moral excuse and pretense of reluctance. Democracies become dictatorships if governments do not listen to the voice of the people. Democracies usually become invisible dictatorships. Democracy is not an incident that happens overnight, nor a gift that America can give to the world. It is a culture which needs peace to evolve. Dictators have always played on the natural human tendency to blame others and to oversimplify. Do they think if we destroy our freedoms for the terrorists they will no longer have a reason to attack us? Do not ever say that the desire to do good by force is a good motive. Neither power, lust nor stupidity are good motives. Do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor, act as if you did. Don't talk to me about atrocities, all war is an atrocity. Don't regard yourself as a guardian of freedom unless you respect and preserve the rights of people you disagree with. Dress it as we may and sing swaggering songs about it. What is war? 9 times out of 10, but murder in uniform? Dulce bellum inexpertus, war is delightful to the inexperienced. During times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. During times of war, hatred becomes quite respectable even though it has to masquerade often under the guise of patriotism. During war, the laws are silent. Each man must for himself alone decide what is right and what is wrong, which course is patriotic and which isn't. Education is a better safeguard of liberty than a standing army. Either war is obsolete, or men are. Emphasis on military prowess is an indication of philosophical poverty. Endless money forms the sinews of war. Cicero. Even the most piddling life is of momentous consequence to its owner. Even if we are spared destruction by war, our lives will have to change if we want to save life from self-destruction. Even philosophers will praise war as ennobling mankind, forgetting the Greek who said, "War is bad in that it begets more evil than it kills." Every move we make in fear of the next war in fact hastens it. Every politician in the world is all for revolution, reason, and disarmament, but only in enemy countries, not in his own. Every man thinks God is on his side. Every government has as much of a duty to avoid war as a ship's captain has to avoid a shipwreck. Every war, when it comes or before it comes, is represented not as a war but as an act of self-defense against a homicidal maniac. Everything secret degenerates, even the administration of justice. Evil is everywhere. Why don't we fight it? Fight the evils of your particular time and place. Fighting is agreeable to those who are strangers to it. First we fought in the name of religion, then communism, and now in the name of drugs and terrorism. Our excuses for global domination always change. Follow not the person carrying flag nor sword, for they will invariably lead you to a cliff and a mighty fall. For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. David Rockefeller. Anti-war one-liners 3. For me war has become a flat, black depression without highlights, a revulsion of the mind and an exhaustion of the spirit. For what can war, but endless war, still breed? Force is all-conquering, but its victories are short-lived. Force always attracts men of low morality. Force without judgment falls on its own weight. Force and fraud are in war the two cardinal virtues. Free nations are peaceful nations. Free nations don't attack each other. Free nations don't develop weapons of mass destruction. Freedom is whatever the president says it is, pending revision. Freedom is not nurtured by nations preparing for war. Freedom is to understand and to be unbounded by that freedom. From fanaticism to barbarism is only one step. God hates violence. He has ordained that all men fairly possess their property, not seize it. Today the real test of America's power and wisdom is not our capacity to make war but our capacity to prevent it. Good leaders serve the interests of their people while unfit leaders exploit their citizens to serve their own. Good intentions will always be pleaded for any assumption of power. Government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. Never for a moment should it be left to irresponsible action. Government's first duty is to protect the people, not run their lives. Governments constantly choose between telling lies and fighting wars, with the end result always being the same. One will always lead to the other. Governments use national animosities, foreign wars, and the glamour of empire making, in order to divert rising sentiment against domestic abuses. Governments have never learned anything from history, or acted on principles deducted from it. Great is the guilt of an unnecessary war. Guard against the impostures of pretended patriotism. Hate is able to provoke disorders, to ruin a social organization, to cast a country into a period of bloody revolutions, but it produces nothing. Have you ever thought that war is a madhouse and that everyone in the war is a patient? He that is the author of a war lets loose the whole contagion of hell and opens a vein that bleeds a nation to death. Hell hath no fury like a non-combatant. History shows that people can be deflected from their natural tendencies by artful propaganda, bogus crises, or other political trickery. History is replete with examples of empires mounting impressive military campaigns on the cusp of their impending economic collapse. History has witnessed the failure of many endeavors to impose peace by war, cooperation by coercion, unanimity by slaughtering dissidents. History teaches us that men and nations behave wisely once they have exhausted all other alternatives. History teaches that war begins when governments believe the price of aggression is cheap. History is littered with wars which everybody knew would never happen. How can you make a war on terror if war itself is terrorism? How does one prevail in war? Both sides have already lost. How could man rejoice in victory and delight in the slaughter of men? How is it possible for people to consider themselves supporters of the troops when they approve of an event that throws those troops into peril? Human failure of communication and failed diplomacy between nations should not yield the ultimate sacrifice, a life. Humanity should question itself, once more, about the absurd and always unfair phenomenon of war. Humanity is quite a unique species since it is the only one with the means to wipe itself out. I hope our wisdom will grow with our power and teach us, that the less we use our power the greater it will be. I have condemned any organizer of war, regardless of his rank or nationality. Anti-war one-liners 4. I hate war for the lies it lives on and propagates, for the undying hatreds it arouses. I hate war for the dictatorships it puts in the place of democracies and for the starvation that stalks after it. I hate war as only a soldier who has lived it can, only as one who has seen its brutality, its futility, its stupidity. I hate it when they say, he gave his life for his country. They don't die for the honor and glory of their country. We kill them. I guess every generation is doomed to fight its war, suffer the loss of the same old illusions and learn the same old lessons on its own. I think that people want peace so much that one of these days government had better get out of their way and let them have it. I want you to know that when we talk about war, we're really talking about peace. I hate war as only a soldier who has lived it can see its brutality, its futility, its stupidity. I believe in adequate defense at the coastline and nothing else. I hope that mankind will settle their differences without cutting throats. I know of no safe depository of the ultimate power of the society but the people themselves. I learned nothing from war. I am an anti-imperialist. I went into the army believing that if you want peace you must prepare for war. I now believe that if you prepare thoroughly for war you will get it. I want to scare the hell out of the rest of the world. I love America more than any other country in the world and, exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. I can tell you this, if I'm ever in a position to call the shots, I'm not going to rush to send somebody else's kids into a war. I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that His justice cannot sleep forever. I think war is a dangerous place. I am opposed to having the eagle put its talons on any other land. I hate those men who would send into war youth to fight and die for them, the pride and cowardice of those old men, making wars that boys must die. I believe in only one thing, liberty, but I do not believe in liberty enough to want to force it upon anyone. I am not blaming those who are resolved to rule, only those who show an even greater readiness to submit. I am not against all wars, just whichever is current. I object to violence because when it appears to do good, the good is only temporary, the evil it does is permanent. I abhor war and view it as the greatest scourge of mankind. I hate war. I'd like to see the government get out of war altogether and leave the whole field to private individuals. I'd like to think the best bunker buster is a diplomat. I'm afraid, based on my own experience, that fascism will come to America in the name of national security. I'm fed up to the ears with old men dreaming up wars for young men to die in. If you support any offensive war, consider yourself just as culpable of murder as the most insane serial killer. If you sacrifice liberty for security, you will lose both. If you succumb to the temptation of using violence in the struggle, your chief legacy to the future will be an endless reign of meaningless chaos. If you love this land of the free, bring em home, bring em home, bring em back from overseas. If you live long enough, you'll see that every victory turns into a defeat. If America becomes militant, it will be because its people choose to become such, it will be because they think that war and warlikeness are desirable. If a war be undertaken before the resources of peace have been tried and proved vain to secure it, that war has no defense, it is a national crime. If everyone demanded peace instead of another television set, then there'd be peace. If men do not now succeed in abolishing war, civilization and mankind are doomed. If my soldiers were to begin to think, not one of them would remain in the army. If peace only had the music and pega entry of war, there'd be no wars. If some people pretend that history or geography gives them the right to subjugate other races, nations, or peoples, there can be no peace. If there is no sufficient reason for war, the war party will make war on one pretext then invent another. If there is one principle more deeply rooted in the mind of every American, it is that we should have nothing to do with conquest. If they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about answers. If, finally, violence meets with violence, we have confirmation of the age-old adage that war, though it kills many men, makes many more men evil. If this phrase of the balance of power is to be always an argument for war, the pretext for war will never be wanting and peace can never be secure. If tyranny and oppression come to this land, it will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy. If we don't stop behaving like the British Empire, we will end up like the British Empire. If you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. If you want to make peace, you don't talk to your friends. You talk to your enemies. If we don't stop extending our troops all around the world in nation-building missions, we're going to have a serious problem coming down the road. If you want war, nourish a doctrine. Doctrines are the most frightful tyrants to which men ever are subject. If we let people see the dead bodies, there would never again be any war. If you kill one person, you are a murderer. If you kill 10 people, you are a monster. If you kill 10,000, you are a national hero. Imperialism is an institution under which one nation asserts the right to seize the land or at least to control the government or resources of another people. In order to rally people, governments need enemies. They want us to be afraid, to hate, so we will rally behind them. In this war as in others, I am less interested in honoring the dead than in preventing the dead. In politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. In war, there are no winners. In war, we always deform ourselves, our essence. In modern war there is no such thing as victor and vanquished. In war, there are no unwounded soldiers. In times of peace, the war party insists on making preparation for war. As soon as prepared for, it insists on making war. In the eyes of empire builders, men are not men but instruments. In war, truth is the first casualty. In all history there is no war which was not hatched by the governments alone, independent of the interests of the people, to whom war is always pernicious even when successful. In any war, the first casualty is common sense and the second is free and open discussion. In order to win, the people have to unite. If you know you're fighting for peace, you're always right. You have to unite as many groups of peace activists as possible and always know that the enemy, the capitalists making money from war, are very strong and evil. In peace, sons bury their fathers, in war, fathers bury their sons. Iraq was a war of choice, not necessity. Is it not a strange blindness on our part to teach publicly the techniques of warfare and to reward with medals those who prove to be the most adroit killers? It is no excuse that he does so in uniform, he only adds the infamy of servitude to the crime of murder. It is the function of the citizen to keep the government from falling into error. Anti-war one-liners 5. It is the youth who must inherit the tribulation, the sorrow that are the aftermath of war. It is unfortunately none too well understood that, just as the state has no money of its own, so it has no power of its own. It is painful enough to discover with what unconcern they speak of war and threaten it. I have seen enough of it to make me look upon it as the sum of all evils. It is not the function of government to keep the citizen from error, it is the function of the citizen to keep the government from falling into error. It is unpatriotic not to tell the truth, whether about the president or anyone else. It is useless to attack men who could not be controlled even if conquered, while failure would leave us in an even worse position. It is not that power corrupts but that power is a magnet to the corruptible. It isn't enough to talk about peace. One must believe it. And it isn't enough to believe in it. One must work at it. It takes 20 years or more of peace to make a man, it only takes 20 seconds of war to destroy him. It takes more courage to get out of a war than it does to get into one. It is a universal truth that the loss of liberty at home is to be charged to the provisions against danger, real or pretended, from abroad. It is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. It is far easier to make war than peace. It is finer to bring one noble human being into the world and rear it well than to kill 10,000. It is not reasonable that those who gamble with men's lives should not pay with their own. It takes courage to speak up. It would be easier to subjugate the entire universe through force than the minds of a single village. It is not enough to say we must not wage war. It is necessary to love peace and sacrifice for it. It is my conviction that killing under the cloak of war is nothing but an act of murder. It is in war that the state really comes into its own, swelling in power, in number, in pride, in absolute dominion over the economy and the society. It is harder to preserve liberty than to obtain it. It's truly ironic how self-proclaimed patriots have a tendency to support those who seek to undermine their country. It's quite fun to fight you know. It's a hell of a hoot. It's fun to shoot some people. I'll be right up front with you, I like brawling. It's more humane to cure your enemies than to kill them. It's one thing to fight for what you believe in, another thing to fight for what others believe in. It's very common for the victims to understand a system better than the people who are holding the stick. It's not a matter of what is true that counts but a matter of what is perceived to be true. Justice tends to be corrupted by political passion. Killing someone is the ultimate crime, while on the other hand, killing someone in uniform is fulfillment of duty. Killing a man in defense of an idea is not defending an idea, it is killing a man. Let us not deceive ourselves. We must elect world peace or world destruction. Let not your zeal to share your principles entice you beyond your borders. Let the diplomats and marshals of the earth shoot each other. Let us form a new religion, that which would be called humanity, with peace as its prophet. Let us become inspired by inherent beauty and not impassioned by manufactured hate. Liberty and democracy become unholy when their hands are dyed red with innocent blood. Look back over the past, with its changing empires that rose and fell, and you can foresee the future, too. Love of power, operating through greed and through personal ambition, was the cause of all these evils. Make your enemies your friends. Make it plain that you have no time for war, that you have more important things to do. Make wars unprofitable and you make them impossible. Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it and eventually they will believe it. Man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. Man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. One who believes himself the master of others is nonetheless a greater slave than they. Man is the only animal of which I am thoroughly and cravenly afraid. Man has no right to kill his brother. Man is the only animal that is cruel. It kills just for the sake of it. Mankind is becoming a single unit, and that for a unit to fight against itself is suicide. Mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. Many politicians want war. May we never confuse honest dissent with disloyal subversion. Men are fighting because they are convinced that the extermination of adversaries is the only means of promoting their own well-being. Military justice is to justice what military music is to music. Military glory is empty. Misery, mutilation, destruction, terror, starvation, and death characterize the process of war and form a principal part of the product. Modern war appears as a struggle led by all the state apparatuses and their general staffs against all men old enough to bear arms. Coercive practices that threaten our neighbors also threaten us. Modern war and modern civilization are utterly incompatible. One or the other must go. Modern society, based as it is on the division of labor, can be preserved only under conditions of lasting peace. Most quarrels are inevitable at the time, incredible afterwards. My mental faculties remained in suspended animation while I obeyed the orders of the higher UPS. This is typical with everyone in the military. My first wish is to see this plague of mankind, war, banished from the earth. My theory is strong people don't need strong leaders. Name me an emperor who was ever struck by a cannonball. National defense is the usual pretext for the policy of fleecing the people. Nations, like individuals, are punished for their transgressions. Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants, it is the creed of slaves. Never believe any war will be smooth and easy, or that anyone who embarks on the strange voyage can measure the tides and hurricanes he will encounter. Never is the power of the state greater and never are the forces of political parties of opposition less effective than at the outbreak of war. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. No nation should go beyond its borders to defend itself. No mother would ever willingly sacrifice her sons for territorial gain, for economic advantage, for ideology. No matter what political reasons are given for war, the underlying reason is always economic. No great dependence is to be placed on the eagerness of young soldiers for action. No war by any nation in any age has ever been declared by the people. No one has deputized America to play Wyatt Earp to the world. No one has ever succeeded in keeping nations at war except by lies. No weapon has ever settled a moral problem. It can impose a solution but it cannot guarantee it to be a just one. No nation ever had an army large enough to guarantee it against attack in time of peace, or ensure it of victory in time of war. Noble people refuse loyalty when injustice holds sway. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. Not only is war a form of legalized murder, but it is mass serial killing. Nothing doth more hurt in a state than that cunning men pass for wise. Nothing except a battle lost can be half as melancholy as a battle won. Nothing good ever comes of violence. O peace! How many wars were waged in thy name? Of all tyrannies, a tyranny exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. Old men declare war. But it is the youth that must fight and die. Old men declare war because they have failed to solve complex political and economic problems. One certain effect of war is to diminish freedom of expression. One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. One can never create freedom by an invading force. One reason the United States finds itself at the edge of a foreign policy disaster is its underinformed citizenry, a key weakness in democracy. One keeps healthy in wartime by a vigorous assertion of values in which war has no part. One day the end of the world will come as a result of a justified war. One is left with the horrible feeling now that war settles nothing, that to win a war is as disastrous as to lose one. Only one thing can conquer war: that attitude of mind which can see nothing in war but destruction and annihilation. Only fools seek power and the greatest fools seek it through force. Anti-war one-liners 6. Only the winners decide what were war crimes. Only a free and unrestrained press can effectively expose deception in government. Our children are not born to hate, they are raised to hate. Thomas Della Parida. Our nation is somewhat sad, but we're angry. There's a certain level of bloodlust but we won't let it drive our reaction. We're steady, clear-eyed, and patient, but pretty soon we'll have to start displaying scalps. Our country is now geared to an arms economy bred in an artificially induced psychosis of war hysteria and an incessant propaganda of fear. Our modern states are preparing for war without even knowing the future enemy. Our neoconservatives are neither new nor conservative, but old as Babylon and evil as hell. Our country is not the only thing to which we owe our allegiance. It is also owed to justice and to humanity. Our government has kept us in a perpetual state of fear, in a continuous stampede of patriotic fervor, with the cry of grave national emergency. Our poverty will be brought home to us to its full extent only after the war. Our reluctance for conflict should not be misjudged as a failure of will. Ours is a world of nuclear giants and ethical infants. Suspicion must always fall on those who attempt to silence their opponents. Outlaw war as a method of the solution of problems between nations. Paramount among the responsibilities of a free press is the duty to prevent any part of the government from deceiving the people. Patriotism is supporting your country when it deserves it. Patriotism at the expense of another nation is as wicked as racism at the expense of another race. Patriotism needs war, a free country does not. Patriotism survives by looting, a free country survives by producing. Peace cannot be achieved through violence, it can only be attained through understanding. Peace and friendship with all mankind is our wisest policy, and I wish we may be permitted to pursue it. Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. Peace has its victories, but it doesn't have as many monuments to unveil. Peace is the product of faith, strength, energy, will, sympathy, justice, imagination, and the triumph of principle. Peace will be realized only by forging bonds of trust between people at the deepest level, in the depths of their very lives. Peace is the virtue of civilization. War is its crime. Peace is not the absence of war, it is a virtue, a state of mind, a disposition for benevolence, confidence, and justice. Peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. Peace is not absence of conflict, it is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. Peace is constructed, not fought for. Peace is a daily, a weekly, a monthly process, gradually changing opinions, slowly eroding old barriers, quietly building new structures. Peace hath higher tests of manhood than battle ever knew. Peace will never be achieved by passivity and quietism. Peace demands the most heroic labor and the most difficult sacrifice. It demands greater heroism than war. Peace and not war is the father of all things. Peace protesters are fighting to save the soul of the human race. We have to be strong enough to speak for the weak and the poor who might not understand that war is ultimately destructive even if it creates jobs. People do not make wars, governments do. People who talk of outlawing the atomic bomb are mistaken. People who are anxious to bring on war don't know what they are bargaining for, they don't see all the horrors that must accompany such an event. Phony pretexts repeated often enough become real reasons. Things that are not true become true in the public mind simply through endless repetition. Political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable. Politicians' logic: something must be done, this is something, therefore we must do it. Politics and crime are the same thing. Politics is the womb in which war develops. Power is usurped from the people, first by implementing fear, then it is maintained by slandering as unpatriotic those who refuse submission. Preventive war is like committing suicide out of fear of death. Probably, no nation is rich enough to pay for both war and civilization. We must make our choice, we cannot have both. Protecting the rights of even the least individual among us is basically the only excuse the government has for even existing. Putting aside all the fancy words and academic double talk, the basic reason for having a military is to do two jobs: to kill people and to destroy. Repetition does not transform a lie into a truth. Right is right, even if everyone is against it, and wrong is wrong, even if everyone is for it. Rulers who want to unleash war know very well that they must procure or invent a first victim. Search for the truth is the noblest occupation of man, its publication is a duty. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, is the motto of the United States Marine Corps. But faithful to what? A code of violence and brotherhood. Setting a good example is a far better way to spread ideals than through force of arms. Silence is betraying humanity. Since the end of the 19th century, if not earlier, presidents have misled the public about their motives and their intentions in going to war. Since the end of the World War II, the United States has fought 3 small wars. We lost all 3 of them, and for the same reason: hubris. So long as the deceit ran along quiet and monotonous, all of us let ourselves be deceived, abetting it unawares or maybe through cowardice. No matter that patriotism is too often the refuge of scoundrels. Dissent, rebellion, and all-around hell-raising remain the true duty of patriots. Social order at the expense of liberty is hardly a bargain. Societies can be sunk by the weight of buried ugliness. Society has arisen out of the works of peace, the essence of society is peacemaking. Some explanations of a crime are not explanations, they're part of the crime. Sovereignty must not be used for inflicting harm on anyone, whether citizen or foreigner. Steer clear of entangling alliances with any portion of the foreign world. Terror is a tactic. We cannot wage war against a tactic. Terrorism is the war of the poor and war is the terrorism of the rich. That we are to stand by the president, right or wrong, is not only unpatriotic and servile, but is morally treasonable to the American public. The loss of liberty at home is to be charged to the provisions against danger, real or imagined, from abroad. The means of defense against foreign danger historically have become the instruments of tyranny at home. The mere act of believing that some wrongful course of action constitutes an advantage is pernicious. The politicians start wars. The moral and constitutional obligations of our representatives in Washington are to protect our liberty, not coddle the world, precipitating no-win wars, while bringing bankruptcy and economic turmoil to our people. The more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws. The more laws, the less justice. The most successful war seldom pays for its losses. The chain reaction of evil wars producing more wars, must be broken or we shall be plunged into the dark abyss of annihilation. The next war may well bury Western civilization forever. The chief qualification of a mass leader has become unending infallibility, he can never admit an error. Anti-war one-liners 7. The occupation and robbery of a nation occurs under the illusion of freeing its citizens from brutal oppression. The one pervading evil of democracy is the tyranny of the party that succeeds, by force or fraud, in carrying elections. The only antidote to the poison of war is the public's courage to disagree with their leader. The Constitution vests the power of declaring war in Congress, therefore no offensive expedition of importance can be undertaken until after they shall have deliberated upon the subject and authorized such a measure. The only security for the American people today, or for any people, is to be found through the control of force rather than the use of force. The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. The opposite of war is not peace, its creation. The people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. Tell them they are being attacked and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. The pertinent question, if Americans did not want these wars, should they have been compelled to fight them? The coward threatens when he is safe. The political object is the goal, war is the means of reaching it, and the means can never be considered in isolation from their purposes. The politicians in this world have at their command weapons of mass destruction far more complex than their own thinking processes. The price of empire is America's soul, and that price is too high. The question in my mind is, how many additional American casualties is war worth? And the answer is not very damned many. The real and lasting victories are those of peace and not of war. The real fabric of American society is not all those flags you see on people's cars. It's in the Bill of Rights and in our constitutional form of government. The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. The life of the nation is secure only while the nation is honest, truthful, and virtuous. The release of atomic energy has not created a new problem. It has merely made more urgent the necessity of solving an existing one. The responsibility of the great states is to serve and not to dominate the world. The cry has been that when war is declared, all opposition should be hushed. A sentiment more unworthy of a free country could hardly be propagated. The role of the military is to fight and win war, and therefore, prevent war from happening in the first place. The very nature of war puts innocent civilians into great jeopardy, especially with modern technology. The right to revolt has sources deep in our history. The root of the evil is not the construction of new, more dreadful weapons. It is the spirit of conquest. The dangerous patriot is a defender of militarism and its ideals of war and glory. The de facto role of the U.S. armed forces will be to keep the world safe for our economy and open to our cultural assault. The demands of internal growth should be more important to us than the need for any external expansion of our power. The U.S. Department of Defense is the behemoth. With an annual budget larger than the gross domestic product of Russia, it is an empire. The deterioration of every government begins with the decay of the principles on which it was founded. The shepherd always tries to persuade the sheep that their interests and his own are the same. The direct use of force is such a poor solution to any problem. It is generally employed only by small children and large nations. The enormous gap between what U.S. leaders do in the world and what Americans think their leaders are doing is one of the great propaganda accomplishments. The essence of so-called war prosperity, it enriches some by what it takes from others. It is not rising wealth but a shifting of wealth and income. The Central Intelligence Agency owns everyone of any significance in the major media. The evils of government are directly proportional to the tolerance of the people. The fact that certain planets are uninhabited may very well derive from the fact that their nuclear scientists are more advanced than ours. The failure to dissect the cause of war leaves us open for the next installment. The bombs in Vietnam explode at home, they destroy the hopes and possibilities for a decent America. The biggest lesson I learned from Vietnam is not to trust our own government. The best defense is no offense. The belief in the possibility of a short decisive war appears to be one of the most ancient and dangerous of human illusions. The basic problems facing the world today are not susceptible to a military solution. The arrogance of officialdom should be tempered and controlled, and assistance to foreign hands should be curtailed, lest Rome fall. The first panacea of a mismanaged nation is inflation of the currency, the second is war. Both bring a temporary prosperity, a permanent ruin. The slightest acquaintance with history shows that powerful republics are the most warlike and unscrupulous of nations. The reality right now is that the most dangerous opinion in the world is the opinion of a U.S. serviceman. The soldier's main enemy is not the opposing soldier but his own commander. The spirit of resistance to government is so valuable on certain occasions that I wish it to be always kept alive. The state acquires power, and because of its insatiable lust for power it is incapable of giving up any of it. The state can be and has often been in the course of history the main source of mischief and disaster. The state thrives on war unless, of course, it is defeated and crushed. The first casualty of war is not truth, but perspective. Once that's gone, truth, like compassion, reason and all the other virtues, wanders around like a wounded orphan. The great armies, accumulated to provide security and preserve the peace, cause war by their own weight. The great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, continued and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive and unrealistic. The great error of nearly all studies of war has been to consider war as an episode in foreign policies, when it is an act of interior politics. The greater the state, the more wrong and cruel its patriotism, and the greater is the sum of suffering upon which its power is founded. The greatest crime since World War II has been U.S. foreign policy. The greatest dangers to liberty lurk in the insidious encroachment by men of zeal, well-meaning but without understanding. The lies the government and media tell are amplifications of the lies we tell ourselves. To stop being conned, stop conning yourself. The greatest menace to freedom is an inert people. The statesman who yields to war fever is no longer the master of policy but the slave of unforeseeable and uncontrollable events. The statesman will invent cheap lies, putting the blame upon the nation that is being attacked, and every man will be glad of these conscience-soothing falsities. The heights of popularity and patriotism are still the beaten road to power and tyranny. The supreme excellence is to subdue the armies of your enemies without even having to fight them. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. The terrorist is the one with the small bomb. The time has come to stop beating our heads against stone walls under the illusion that we have been appointed policemen to the human race. The time not to become a father is 18 years before a war. The tragedy of modern war is that the young men die fighting each other instead of their real enemies back home in the capitals. The tragedy of war is that it uses man's best to do man's worst. The truth is that neither British nor American imperialism was or is idealistic. It has always been driven by economic or strategic interests. The tyranny of a prince in an oligarchy is not so dangerous to public welfare as the apathy of a citizen in a democracy. The tyrant always talks as if he's preserving the best interests of his people when he actually acts to undermine them. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. The urge to save humanity is almost always a false front for the urge to rule. The war is not meant to be won, it is meant to be continuous. The war is waged against its own subjects and its object is not the victory but to keep the power intact. The war on terrorism is akin to the war on drugs, unwinnable, unless you kill everyone, or address the root causes. The war was an unnecessary condition of affairs and might have been avoided if forbearance and wisdom had been practiced on both sides. The welfare of the people has always been the alibi of tyrants. The hardest thing for me in Vietnam wasn't seeing the wounded and dead. It was watching the big transport jets come in, bringing loads of fresh new boys for the war. The guns and the bombs, the rockets and the warships, are all symbols of human failure. The greatest purveyor of violence in the world today is government. The greatest protection against war is a well-educated populace. The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. The rich make war to make money, the poor die fighting in it. You can't say civilization doesn't advance, for in every war they kill you in a new way. Mark Twain. War, men going back to adolescence to play their little games. Filth, terrible illnesses, hunger, fire, destruction, evil, this is military glory, this is war. Henri Hardouin-Gardouin. The world cannot continue to wage war like physical giants and to seek peace like intellectual pygmies. The philosophy of protectionism is a philosophy of war. The worst barbarity of war is that it forces men collectively to commit acts against which individually they would revolt with their whole being. The worst crimes were dared by a few, willed by more and tolerated by all. The worst evils which mankind has ever had to endure were inflicted by bad governments. The world should take notice when someone with a fanatic mind and with powerful means, receives his marching orders from heaven. The world should be worried about those who go around the planet with a can of gasoline in one hand and a box of matches in the other, pretending to sell fire insurance. The government is a temporary servant. Its function is to obey orders, not create them. The actions of a single leader can have drastic effects on the prestige of an entire nation. The only maxim of a free government ought to be to trust no man living with power to endanger the public liberty. The passive acceptance of war is common. The solution is to unite and demand a government made up of online voting. There is no harm in a well-fed lion. It has no ideals, no sect, no party. There should not be wars ever. There are men in all countries who get their living by wars, so they have to keep the fights going. There has never been a just one, never an honorable one, on the part of the instigator of the war. There is nothing more frightening than active ignorance. There is nothing politically right that is morally wrong. There is nothing that war has ever achieved that we could not better achieve without it. There should be an honest attempt at the reconciliation of differences before resorting to combat. There is only a loser, and the loser is mankind. There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. There is no flag large enough to cover the shame of killing innocent people. There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it. There are many terrorist states in the world, but the United States is unusual in that it is officially committed to international terrorism. There are only two powers in the world, the sword and the mind. In the long run, the sword is always defeated by the mind. There are only two things we should fight for. One is the defense of our homes and the other is the Bill of Rights. War for any other reason is simply a racket. There can be no public or private virtue unless the foundation of action is the practice of truth. There is but one evil, war. All the other proclaimed evils such as hate, greed, discrimination, and jealousy are only subcategories of it. There were no international terrorists in Iraq until we went in. It was we who gave the perfect conditions in which Al-Qaeda could thrive. There is neither rank nor station nor prerogative in the Republic of the Grave. There is no morality in war. Morality is the privilege of those judging from the distance. War is only death and destruction. These people want us to leave. I think the world would be better off if we did leave. They talk about conscription as a democratic institution. Yes, so is a cemetery. They are nations of eternal war. All their energies are expended in the destruction of the labor, property, and lives of people. Think of war as a game of Russian roulette. It is a game of chance with your life as the grand prize. Think of the press as a great keyboard on which the government can play. This war is not necessary. We are truly sleepwalking through history. This much is clear: violence breeds violence, repression brings retaliation, and only a cleansing of our whole society can remove this sickness from our soul. This president failed so miserably in diplomacy that we are now forced to war. This, I hope, will be the age of experiments in government, and that their basis will be founded in principles of honesty, not of mere force. This and no other is the root from which a tyrant springs. When he first appears he is a protector. Anti-war one-liners 8. Those who are asking for more government interference are asking ultimately for more compulsion and less freedom. Those who do not move, do not notice their chains. Those who give up essential liberties for temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Those who stand for nothing fall for anything. Those who suppress freedom always do so in the name of law and order. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. 'Tis not my country right or wrong, 'tis, my country, that which is right to be kept right, that which is wrong to be set right. 'Tis nobler to lose honor to save the lives of men than it is to gain honor by taking them. To defeat the aggressors is not enough to make peace durable. The main thing is to discard the ideology that generates war. To declare that the end justifies the means, to declare that the government may commit crimes, is crazy. To some degree it matters who's in office, but it matters more how much pressure they're under from the public. To wage war, you need first of all money, second, you need money, and third, you also need money. To the wicked, everything serves as pretext. To initiate a war of aggression is the supreme international crime, differing only from other war crimes in that it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the whole. To announce that there must be no criticism of the president is morally treasonable to the American public. To kill a man is not to defend a doctrine, but to kill a man. To preserve our independence, we must make our election between economy and liberty, or profusion and servitude. To fight, you must be brutal and ruthless, and the spirit of ruthless brutality will enter into the very fiber of national life. To plunder, to slaughter, to steal, these things they misname empire, and where they make a desert, they call it peace. Today the real test of power is not capacity to make war but capacity to prevent it. Total war is no longer war waged by all members of one national community against all those of another. It is total because it may well involve the whole world. True patriotism hates injustice in its own land more than anywhere else. Truth stands, even if there be no public support. It is self-sustained. Two armies that fight each other is like one large army that commits suicide. Tyrants seldom want pretexts. Under conditions of peace the warlike man attacks himself. Usually, terrible things that are done with the excuse that progress requires them are not really progress at all, but just terrible things. Victory is no longer a truth. It's only a word to describe who is left alive in the ruins. American President Johnson, 1964. Victory attained by violence is tantamount to a defeat, for it is momentary. Vietnam should remind conservatives that whenever you put your faith in big government for any reason, sooner or later you wind up an apologist for mass murder. Violence can only be concealed by a lie, and the lie can only be maintained by violence. Violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. Violence, even well-intentioned, always rebounds upon oneself. Violence is an admission that one's ideas and goals cannot prevail on their own merits. Violence is not power, but the absence of power. War is an immense mass of evil. War is ugly, it has no morality, no compassion. I have to kill my enemy and his people because if I don't, tomorrow he may kill me and my children. This doesn't make me evil, just wise. Soldier in Guatemala war is incompatible with Christianity. You ask me, is it necessary for civilized people to make war? And I tell you not only is it already unnecessary, but it was never necessary, and not sometimes but always it destroys the normal development of humanity, destroys justice, and stops progress. Galston Moore. It is not true that a war against a foreign nation can be sacred. It is not true that the earth wants blood. The earth wants pure water from the sky for its rivers, pure dew from its clouds, but not blood. War is cursed by God as are those who participate in it. Alfred de Vigny. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a highly decorated five-star general, the supreme commander of all Allied forces during World War II, in his farewell speech said, "We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions." Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security more than the net income of all United States corporations. This conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to recognize its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved, so is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or our democratic processes. There's only one solution to the police state. Get rid of it. War is a quarrel between two thieves too cowardly to fight their own battle. War, profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. War is a way of shattering to pieces. War is an instrument entirely inefficient toward redressing wrong. War is meddling in other people's affairs. What political leaders decide, intelligence services tend to seek to justify. War is barbarism. War settles nothing. To win a war is as disastrous as to lose one. Agatha Christie, An Autobiography, 1977. War is a failure of human intelligence. War is a bankruptcy of policy. War is a defeat for humanity. War grows out of the desire of the individual to gain advantage at the expense of his fellow man. War has become a spectator sport for Americans. War doesn't make boys men, it makes men dead. War does not determine who is right, only who is left. War creates peace like hate creates love. War comes from our being immature, fearful, and injured and not being able to conceive of other ways of solving problems. War can really cause no economic boom, at least not directly, since an increase in wealth never does result from destruction of goods. War brings out the most negative emotional human responses on both sides. War is a racket. War is not an activity for human beings, war is for criminals, rape, robbery, and murder. War is hell. War is both the product of an earlier corruption and a producer of new corruptions. War is eternity jammed into frantic minutes that will fill a lifetime with dreams and nightmares. War is fear cloaked in courage. War is the true nurse of executive aggrandizement. War is just a racket. War is never a solution, it is an aggravation. War is not a word, it's an acronym for wasting another's resources. War is not an adventure. It is a disease. It is like typhus. War is not its own end, except in some catastrophic slide into absolute damnation. War is not the continuation of politics with different means, it is the greatest mass crime perpetrated on the community of man. War is a cowardly escape from the problems of peace. War is organized murder and torture against our brothers. War is the blackest villainy of which human nature is capable. War is the business of barbarians. War is the cemetery of futures promised. War is greed for someone. War is the gambling table of governments and citizens, the dupes of the game. Anti-war one-liners 9. War is the greatest plague that can affect humanity. It destroys religion, it destroys states, it destroys families. War is the most striking instance of the failure of intelligence to master the problem of human relationships. War is the only game in which both sides lose. War is the statesman's game, the priest's delight, the lawyer's jest, the hired assassin's trade. War is the tool of small-minded scoundrels who worship the death of others on the altar of their greed. War is ego. War is the unfolding of miscalculations. War is too serious a matter to entrust to military men. War is wretched beyond description, and only a fool or a fraud could sentimentalize its cruel reality. War may be only temporary, but its toll remains permanently. War paralyzes your courage and deadens the spirit of true manhood. War prosperity is like the prosperity that an earthquake or a plague brings. War remains the decisive human failure. War settles nothing. War should be the politics of last resort. War technology is science in the service of obscene anatomical vandalism. War proponents are trying to get something for nothing. War will exist until that distant day when the conscientious objector enjoys the same reputation and prestige that the warrior does today. War, a time-tested political tactic guaranteed to raise a president's popularity rating by at least 30 points. It is especially useful during election years and economic downturns. War, after all, what is it that the people get? Widows, taxes, wooden legs and debt. War is as much a punishment to the punisher as to the sufferer. War is harmful, not only to the conquered but to the conqueror. War, first, one hopes to win. In the end, one is surprised that everyone has lost. War should be made a crime, and those who instigate it should be punished as criminals. War might be avoidable were more emphasis placed on the training to social interest, less on the attainment of egotistical grandeur. War is a lottery of survival. War is a positive, precise, and specific evil, of gigantic proportions. War is deceptive because it provides jobs to the poor, but at the same time many get killed. War is a mad way for a few people to make money. War destroys the deepest hopes of men. We must protest. War is wrong except if you are directly attacked. War's a game, which, were their subjects wise, kings would not play it. Wars cause destruction. Wars frequently begin 10 years before the first shot is fired. Wars generally do not resolve the problems for which they are fought and therefore prove ultimately futile. Wars are an aristocratic mode of plundering and oppressing commerce. Wars are the hobbies of half-informed children who have somehow come into possession of the levers of power. Wars of aggression are popular nowadays with those nations convinced that only victory and conquest could improve their material well-being. Wars of aggression are the instruments of insane tyrants. Wars should be over in 3 days or less. Wars teach us to hate everybody. Wars are poor chisels for carving out peaceful tomorrows. Was the killing of my family a mistake? No, it was not. They fly their planes and look down on us, the mere Afghan people, who have no planes, and they bomb us for our birthright and with all contempt. John Pilger. Washington is an alien city-state that rules America and much of the rest of the world in the way that Rome ruled the Roman Empire. We Americans have no commission from God to police the world. We are all familiar with the argument, make war dreadful enough and there will be no war. And none of us believe it. We, the people, the ones responsible to determine whether the war that our Marines, soldiers, and airmen are fighting in is worth the cause. We are not free if we can't control our own government and its policies. And we will never do that if we remain ignorant. We need a more peaceful world, growing out of more peaceful families and neighborhoods and communities. To secure and cultivate such peace, we must love others, even our enemies as well as our friends. Howard W. Hunter. We will not learn how to live together in peace by killing each other's children. We believed ourselves indestructible, then we started getting killed in war. We cloak ourselves in cold indifference to the unnecessary suffering of others even when we cause it. We raise armies for glory and conquest. We have all taken risks in the making of war. Isn't it time that we should take risks to secure peace? We have guided missiles and misguided men. We have met the enemy and he is us. We have to show the people that war is not patriotic. We have war when at least one of the parties to a conflict wants something more than it wants peace. Be loyal to your country always and to the government only when it deserves it. We must concentrate not merely on the negative expulsion of war but the positive affirmation of peace. We must get away from the idea that America is to be the leader of the world in everything. We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty. When loyal opposition dies, I think the soul of America dies with it. We must not only cease our present desire for the growth of the state, but we must desire its decrease, its weakening. We must pursue peaceful end through peaceful means. We will bankrupt ourselves in the vain search for absolute security. We must recognize the chief characteristic of the modern era, a permanent state of what I call violent peace. We need a type of patriotism that recognizes the virtues of those who are opposed to us. We say that we care about the war, but we don't even really know what we're fighting for. We shall never be able to cause physical disarmament until we have succeeded in causing moral disarmament. We thought, because we had power, we had wisdom. We used to wonder where war lived, what it was that made it so vile. And now we realize that it lives inside ourselves. We must realize that no arsenal, or no weapon in the arsenals of the world, is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. We must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate and be, instead, a proud confederation of mutual trust and respect. What needs to be outlawed is war. What the people want is very simple: peace. What is more immoral than war? What is morally wrong can never be advantageous, even when it enables you to make some gain that you believe to be to your advantage. What is absurd and monstrous about war is that men who have no personal quarrel should be trained to murder one another in cold blood. What experience and history teach is that people and governments never have learned anything from history, or acted on principles deduced from it. What difference does it make to the dead, the orphans and the homeless, whether the mad destruction is wrought under the name of totalitarianism or the holy name of liberty and democracy? What a country calls its vital interests are not things that help its people live, but things that help it make war. What a cruel thing is war, to fill our hearts with hatred instead of love for our neighbors and to devastate the fair face of this beautiful world. When Hitler came for the Jews, I was not a Jew, therefore, I was not concerned. And when Hitler attacked the Catholics, I was not a Catholic, and therefore, I was not concerned. And when Hitler attacked the unions and the industrialists, I was not a member of the unions and I was not concerned. Then, Hitler attacked me and the Protestant Church and there was nobody left to be concerned. Pastor Martin Niemöller. When the largest industry in the world is no longer war, I will accept Darwin's theory of evolution. When the tyrant has disposed of foreign enemies by conquest or treaty and there is nothing to fear from them, then he is always stirring up some war or other, in order that the people may require a leader. When people speak to you about a preventive war, you tell them to go and fight it. When you do the right thing and oppose the status quo, they'll come out and attack you. When people have friends and customers in other lands, they tend to take a dim view of their government dropping bombs on them. When goods don't cross borders, soldiers will. When fanatics are on top, there is no limit to oppression. When American presidents prepare for foreign wars, they lie. When there is a war, the government and pro-war people make it easy to attack the anti-war people. When you are winning a war, almost everything that happens can be claimed to be right and wise. When will mankind be convinced and agree to settle their difficulties by arbitration? When a war breaks out, people say, it's too stupid, it can't last long. But though a war may be too stupid, that doesn't prevent its lasting. When you fight for peace, you know you're always right. When men go to war, what they want is to impose on their enemies the victor's will and call it peace. When the people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. Where you have a concentration of power in a few hands, all too frequently men with the mentality of gangsters get control. There's no difference between one's killing and making decisions that will send others to kill. It's exactly the same thing, or even worse. Where is the justice of political power if it executes the murderer and jails the plunderer? Where is the justice of political power if it? Whether or not patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel, national security can be the last refuge of the tyrant. Whoever wishes peace among peoples must fight against war. Whoever wants peace among nations must seek to limit the state and its influence most strictly. Why is it so hard to oppose the government even when we all know it's disgusting? Why should we hear about body bags and deaths? Why should I waste my life on war? Why should you ask blood be spilled for a cause that is not in the interest of the people? Will the threat of common extermination continue? Must children receive the arms race from us as a necessary inheritance? Wisdom is better than weapons of war. Working for peace in the future is to work for peace in the present moment. Yes, we love peace, but we are not willing to take wounds for it as we are for war. You will never end terrorism by terrorizing others. You cannot be on one hand dedicated to peace and on the other dedicated to violence. Those two things are irreconcilable. You can't have this kind of war. There just aren't enough bulldozers to scrape the bodies off the streets. You cannot win a war on terrorism. It's like having a war on jealousy. You are not going to get peace with millions of armed men. The chariot of peace cannot advance over a road littered with cannon. You can no more win a war than you can win an earthquake. You consider war to be inevitable? Very good. Let everyone who advocates war be enrolled in a special regiment of advance guards, for the front of every storm, of every attack, to lead them all. You lose nothing through peace. You can lose everything through war. You never need an argument against the use of violence, you need an argument for it. You can wipe out your opponents. But if you do it unjustly, you become eligible for being wiped out yourself. You're not supposed to be so blind with patriotism that you can't face reality. Wrong is wrong no matter who does it or who says it. You've got to forget about this civilian. Whenever you drop bombs, you're going to hit civilians.